little fox.
Gulliver's Travels, Chapter 4. Gulliver Goes Free. I hoped to be set free one day, so I was nice to the Lilliputians. Gradually, they lost their fear of me. Sometimes the children even played hide and seek in my hair. One day, the king said to me,
I invite you to attend an important performance. It is a contest called rope dancing. Come with me.
For this contest, a thin rope was tied between two poles very high above the ground. The people who wanted the best jobs had to dance on this rope. Each dancer tried to jump higher than the others. I had never seen such a dangerous sport. Your Majesty, I said, many dancers must fall and be hurt or killed.
Yes,
he replied.
Some break their arms or legs, and several have broken their necks. But I give the most important jobs in my kingdom to the men who are not afraid and jump the highest. These brave men will work hard for Lilliput.
What a strange way to choose who will work for the country, I thought. Then, as the king watched, I attached each corner of my handkerchief to a strong stick. I pushed the 4 sticks into the ground. My handkerchief was now under the rope, but above the ground. Your Majesty, I said, any dancer who falls will now land on my handkerchief and not get hurt.
You are wise, enormous one,
said the king.
I am pleased with your invention.
His family and many other people watched the rope dancing. Would you and the queen like to see better? I asked the king. I gently put them on my hand and held it beside the rope. They had a good view of the dancers. One very skilled performer turned several cartwheels on the rope. Then he held onto the rope and flipped his body right over it. The king and queen clapped loudly and cheered. Later, the king told me that he made this man one of his chief advisors. The king and I met often. He seemed to enjoy our conversations. One day, I said again, Your Majesty, please set me free. This time he answered,
I have talked to my advisors. We agree that you have been good to our people. I will set you free if you make 6 promises.
What must I promise? I asked.
You must help my country in war and peace,
said the king. I promise, I said.
Before you visit the capital,
continued the king,
you must give 2 hours warning. Then my people can get out of the streets.
I promise.
You must not step on my people or their animals.
I promise.
You must carry important messages for me quickly to anywhere in Lilliput.
I promise.
Also,
said the king,
you must help my workers carry heavy objects.
I promise.
The last promise,
said the king,
is this. You must not leave the kingdom without my permission. If you do so, I will be angry.
I promise that too, I told the king.
Then you may have your freedom,
he said.
Unchain the enormous one.
The king ordered his men.
Now you can travel throughout Lilliput,
he said. Thank you, Your Majesty, I said. I would like to see more of your country.
When you come to the capital city, you may visit my palace,
the king said.
I'm sure you will find it the most beautiful you have ever seen.
Gulliver's Travels, Chapter 5, A Visit to Mildendo. On my first day of freedom, I went into the capital city, Mildendo. I stepped over the city walls and walked through the streets. Most of the houses in Mildendo had 3 to 5 stories. They were painted in many bright colors, and some had unusual patterns painted on them. People watched me curiously from every window. The city was a square, with two main streets that crossed in the middle of the city. These two streets divided Mildendo into quarters. The main streets were just wide enough for me to walk down. I could not go into the smaller streets though, because my feet were too big, and those streets were too narrow. Because the Lilliputians are so small, I had to walk very carefully so as not to step on anyone. "Hello," I said to people as I passed them. Some people waved. A man in a blue coat called out,
Welcome to Mildendo.
"This is the most crowded city I've ever seen," I said to him.
500,000 people live here.
He replied almost proudly. The king's palace was in the center of the city, surrounded by a high, thick wall. I climbed over the wall and lay down on the ground. From there, I could see into the palace rooms. Everything in the palace was beautiful, just as the king had said. In one room, I saw the queen talking with some ladies. When she saw me, she came to the window.
Enormous one,
She said,
welcome to our fair city. You may kiss my hand.
her hand was smaller than the nail of my little finger. "I am honored to see you, Your Majesty," I replied. "Your palace is magnificent. In all my travels, I have never seen a better palace." I kissed her tiny hand very carefully. The queen and I talked for a little while. All things in Lilliput, the people, the birds, the animals, the plants and trees, are tiny. The people would fit nicely into my daughter's dollhouse. Even the tallest trees on the island are only a little taller than I am. When I first arrived, I was surprised at the smallness of everything. After a few weeks, though, I got used to it. Day by day, I learned more about the customs of Lilliput. In Lilliput, as in England, a person who does something bad is punished. The king of Lilliput, however, also rewards good people. If they obey all laws for 6 years, he gives them money. "What an interesting idea," I said to myself. "The King of England does not reward people for good behavior. His people might behave better if he did." One day, a visitor came to see me.
My name is Reldresal.
He said,
I am the king's chief assistant. I help him make decisions and take care of his important business.
"I am very happy to meet you, sir," I said to Reldresal. "Please thank His Majesty for giving me my freedom. Now I can explore your lovely island,"
The king sets you free
explained my new friend.
because he needs your help. Lilliput is in danger.
"What kind of danger?" I asked.
That is a long story.
Reldresal replied.
Let me tell you a little of the history of Lilliput.
Gulliver's Travels, Chapter 6, Lilliput in Danger.
There are two political groups in Lilliput,
Began Reldresal.
the high heels and the low heels. The groups are named after the style of shoes their members wear. Once, the high heels were the most popular group.
Reldresal went on.
Our king and his officials, however, are low heels.
Do the two groups get along? I asked.
Oh no, the two groups hate each other.
Said Reldresal.
The king is afraid that the high heels may try to take his power.
And could they?
Perhaps. We think that there are more high heels than low heels in Lilliput.
Said Reldresal.
What's worse, the king is very upset with his son, the prince of Lilliput. The prince wears one shoe with a high heel. His other shoe has a low heel. That's why the prince moves up and down as he walks. The king also has enemies in other places.
Reldresal continued.
Lilliput and a nearby island, Blefuscu, have been at war for 3 years.
That island to the east.
Reldresal nodded.
How did this war start?
I asked.
The war began over how people cut open boiled eggs.
Reldresal explained.
I beg your pardon?
I thought that I had misunderstood his words. I was still learning Lilliputian.
Boiled eggs,
He repeated.
People in Lilliput like to eat boiled eggs. An egg has a big end and a small pointed end. Almost everyone in Lilliput used to cut open their boiled eggs at the big end. The problem started when our king's grandfather was a little boy. He was then the prince of Lilliput, and his father was the king. One day, the prince cut open his egg at the big end. He got careless and cut his finger. The king got very angry because the prince was hurt. That day, the king made a new law. From then on, everyone in Lilliput had to cut open their boiled eggs at the small end. Small enders are people who obey the law. Big enders refuse to obey the law.
I suppose,
I said.
that these two groups also hate each other?
Correct. Over the years, they have had many fights.
Said Reldresal.
Our current king is a small ender. Some big enders have gone to live in Blefuscu. The king of Blefuscu would like to take over Lilliput, and the big enders support him. We have heard rumors that the Blefuscan king plans to attack Lilliput with many ships. Can you find a way to help us?
Reldresal,
I said.
I'm sure I can.
He told me that more than 50 ships were in the harbor at Blefuscu. Only about a kilometer of sea separates the two islands. The water between them is quite shallow. For the next few days, I kept away from the shore of Lilliput that is opposite Blefuscu. I did not want the Blefuscans to see me. I had figured out a plan for helping the king of Lilliput. But if the Blefuscans knew about me, my plan would fail. A few days later, I spoke to the king.
I have a secret plan,
I said.
to steal many of the Blefuscan ships.
Then your enemies will not be able to invade Lilliput,
I would appreciate your help, enormous one.
replied the king. After I explained my plan, he said,
Tell me what you need to make your plan work.
Have your workmen make 50 very large metal hooks.
I told him.
I need lots of strong rope as well.
Those things will be ready in 2 days.
Promised the king. The look on his face was very serious.